Welcome to How We Get Through, the podcast where we share stories, mental health insights, and healing advice on life's everyday challenges. I'm your host, Jen, a licensed therapist and founder of the How We Get Through app. Today's guest is Nick Berry, a licensed marriage and family therapist in Los Angeles. In this episode, we address the complexities of internalized homophobia within the LGBTQAI plus community. Our conversation with Nick highlights the significance of parents exploring their own biases to foster and create loving spaces for our children who are questioning their own sexuality. Join us as we learn how to foster connection, collective healing, and a meaningful change within our families and communities. You won't want to miss it. Okay, all right. Well, welcome back to the How We Get Through podcast. Today's guest is a real fun one. We have Nick Berry, a licensed marriage and family therapist who has a private practice in downtown LA, which is so fun. Nick helps gay and queer men and couples navigate the challenges that come from outside and inside the gay community. And Nick is currently building beautiful community for gay and queer men through another mental health app called Unite Plus. So we're so excited to have you here.
Thank you for having me. This has been like a literal process, right? I mean, for you, obviously, but when did you put out that original, where was that out? On LinkedIn? Did you put that?
I was just going to talk about how we met. So Nicky B, cold DM me on LinkedIn. Yes. I was like, hey, I'm making this app. And he was like, hey, what's it about? And we just became fast friends from then on out. Yes.
Totally.
And you went to Chapman, right, too?
Yeah, I went to Chapman. Well, I went to undergrad at Chapman. Well, University of Redlands, and then Chapman I finished. And then I went to Cal Baptist for my graduate degree.
Yeah. So we might have crossed paths at some point as well.
I'm sure we know people that know us.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
but you, I remember you had I responded, and there was no indication as to like what the population was focused on. You were like,
oh yeah.
So it's kind of, and like knowing you now, I could like totally like imagine how you said it in your head. You were like, so this is for women. Like, how can you help that? And I said, well, I'm a gay man who loves women, who has just grown up around women. And also I think gay men and women just have a natural connection, right? And there are things that I've worked with women, obviously. And so I think we had kind of like chatted, and the course that I created, was something I was like, and I think, was it you or me that kind of like suggested this, like talking to our kids about?
I can't remember.
Or was it like a joint, like brilliant mind collaboration?
Yes. Two minds coming together. But I think it was like, how do we kind of bridge this gap and connect this gap around, it's interesting as you're saying this, because that was like a year ago that we talked about that. And like in these last few weeks, I'm like, interestingly we're like separating women and we're separating men. And then we have gender in the middle of that. And that's a spectrum. But what I'm hearing you say when gay men and women have this connection, it kind of reminds me of like the body is made up of male and female energy, right? And so when we can actually come together with male and female, like that's when we're the most powerful, right? That's when we're the most whole. I'm sorry, I took this a way different direction, but I just feel it in my bones of like, why wouldn't you be a healing space for women?
Yeah. And I think that it would serve our, people we help, people we service, just humanity in general, if we didn't. And I think you and I, just like doing the work that we've done, like knowing what we know, I think we do understand the significance and the importance of having that mind, body, spiritual connection, right? That's like the spiritual connection. And so, to not even take that into account, I think would really do people a disservice. So
yeah, exactly. And it is like, exciting to have you on. And I think, again, this like expansion of what healing can look like. And what we talked about for the course is, wanting the courses to be really specific. But I think that specific piece of how do we talk to our kids about their sexuality. And I would love to know like more about you. Like, how did Nicky B become the therapist that he is, living in downtown LA? Like, take us back. How did you get called into this space?
So like living the dream, basically is what I hear. Living the gay man's dream. So my life could be like described as putting a Lego set together. So if you see behind, um, like I think looking at having an instruction manual as to what life is supposed to be, according to who's making the life, who's like describing what the life is supposed to look like, and then putting it together. And like this back here, this Van Gogh Lego set took me like forever to put together. I mean, like it took some time off, and then I started putting it together, and I was like, this is gonna be a great mindfulness skill. And like I there were great. There were 3 or 4 times where I was like, why am I missing a row? Like, what is happening here? And so getting really frustrated and then really checking in with myself and saying, why am I not just being very present? Right. And I think looking at my life up to kind of leading up to where I am now, I think I was trying to follow like this instruction manual based on what I thought it was supposed to be. So I grew up, in a very heteronormative, and I know some people like have, they look at that word and they're like, ooh, heteronormative. But I think when we look at the majority of the like how life goes, like it's a very heteronormative process, right? And so being very like understanding of like everybody, and like growing up in a very like small Latino town, San Jacinto, I think that it did expose me to other cultures and other ways of life. And then get through life. I moved to Long Beach, and I'm like, this is where I'm going to come out and be my authentic self. And so I'd been in a couple of relationships before that, and I moved to Long Beach, and just like being like hit with the reality of what the gay world and culture is, I was like, why am I so judgmental? What is happening? Like, why am I feeling this way? And so I think it's just like being really confronted with this, like this cognitive dissonance of this is what I know and what I've been told. And that's like basic human values: respect people, you get respect back. But then like, why am I experiencing this judgment and this like these like negative internal processes? And so the idea of like internalized homophobia really, I think, hit me. And I think homophobia in such an implicit way, because it wasn't really like growing up, I didn't really like hear like gay people are bad, because there just weren't gay people around. So really, you heard about them. There were a couple of people in high school that you would know they were gay, but nobody really talked about it, and everybody just knew each other. So there wasn't a need to like discriminate, or like it was just what it was. And so I think having that moment of like, wow, this is what internalized homophobia is, was so just daunting. And I think moving to LA from Long Beach, another experience where it's like LA being so isolating and so kind of like leaving people with this feeling of loneliness. And you go to LA like with this like aspiration of like, whatever I'm going to do here in LA, I'm going to be successful. And like, I've been told, or I like experienced being like the big fish in the little pond kind of type thing. And so I moved to LA, and again, another like reality check of like, oh, even though you're from California, you're from Southern California, people that live in Los Angeles. Like, why are people not like, we're talking about hanging out tomorrow night, but like, why are people flaking? Why are people saying, oh, I can't make it? Why are people just ghosting you? And I think that you just like go through life with these like hard reality checks where I think if you don't have the support to really kind of go through those moments where you're really kind of going against the norm, you really are put in this place of like feeling lonely and resorting to like things that help you get through those moments, like substance use and like hanging out with the wrong people and doing those sort of things, that you like come out of that and you're like, okay, cool, I came out of it. And then you're still confronted with all of these like these psychological dilemmas. And so for me, it's been a lot of trauma work. It's been a lot of therapy. It's been a lot of just like taking time off, moving, being confronted with like stillness. And I think that stillness has been what I've like ran from my entire life. And my mom always tells me, she's like, you could never sit still. Like, you've always been like wanting to be out of the house. Even when I was little, apparently I would like run out of the house naked down the street, and like never being able to just be present. And I think finally the end of last year, a lot of things just like settled. I intentionally was single. I did not move for the first time after a year in like 5 years. And, the pandemic stuff hit me. It was like the perfect storm this last year where I think I had to go through all of that stuff to really get to the place where I am now. And the place where I am now is so magical. Like people I have in my life, I really respect and value. Great things are happening with my career. And I think I'm just really, for the first time in my life, at 41 years old, really just like, wow, like I know exactly who I am and what I want, don't want, what I expect out of people and don't expect out of people. Right. So I think that's kind of like a description of my journey here. So
Yes. Oh, I love it. Love it. And I feel like it's never too late to know yourself. And again, that it's almost like that evolution. Like this is that next layer, and the other layer is going to be deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. But it is nice when it finally freaking clicks and you're like,
uh, and it just like, I think that a lot of people like expect this like boom. Like I think the feeling that maybe we both can like relate to is getting like on the road to licensure, right? And then you're like 3,000 hours, boom, boom, boom. That's like the magic number. And then like life happens, and then you're like, for whatever reason, you're either present and you're not focused on like the 3,000 hours concept, or things are happening, and then you look back and you're like, what? Like I should be doing my like track your hours now, and then it's like, oh, I am way past my hours. And I think that there's like this like, oh, there's this expectation of like you finish your hours and everything is so fantastic, you get licensed and it all just makes sense. But it's like not until later, after like you really stop and reflect on like your progress and where you're at and how far you come, that click really is more significant and monumental.
yeah. And I'd like to bring it back to being gay or being queer as this added layer of who the hell am I and when do I get to be that, right? And I think what the parallel is like this chasing, like I will feel happy when, I will feel settled when, I will feel accepted when. And it's such an internal process. Obviously, external is a big factor, but I just would love for you to talk about like, how has that journey been for you, or how are you seeing it with your clients or your community? And what does that look like?
Mhm. Um, yeah, for me, and I think like the clients that I think like what I've really kind of narrowed down my niche to be, and I think that's what like Unite really focuses on, is getting people to a place that they just find connection outside of the like traditional bar or traditional like space occupied by primarily gay LGBTQIA queer individuals. And so for me, the process looked like, cool, I'm going to be in a relationship. And like my first relationship was significant because that was my very first relationship I'd been in. I hadn't come out yet. And so it was my first gay relationship also. And so there were like, coming from like this like model that I was like trained in on how to be in a relationship. You like stay in a relationship, you make it work, make it work, make it work, make it work. And it's only when something really, really like horrible happens, really catastrophic, where it makes sense to walk away from the relationship, that's when it's okay to leave. Right. And I think that I see that a lot in my clients, whether they're gay or straight, is I ask my clients why, you're in this relationship, you keep going back to it. And we explore their relationship history, looking at their first model of what a relationship was. And they knew there was conflict. They knew that there was tension. They knew there was betrayal in the relationship between their parents, because it's so permeable, right? We're so like, my parents like would fight all the time. So I knew that there was conflict. So I was modeled, even though there's conflict, we rise above and we stay in the relationship. And it was never modeled to us. Yeah, it was never modeled to us like, hey, this is not working for me, and how to have like a healthy separation from that person, right? And so going through that relationship, that's what I was modeled. So that's what I practiced. And also on top of that, like, things within the relationship happened, and I'm grateful for those things that happened in the relationship, because everything everything now that I kind of have experienced where I have perceived it as like this like detrimental or horrible thing, actually I'm seeing like there's so many like instances where like there's parallels with me and my clients. And I feel as like wounded healers, like if you're able to get through those experiences, you're able to help people that aren't able to get through those experiences. And just having those exposure to those situations, I think makes us those people that we can like model that behavior. And so what I saw, like I got out of the relationship and then I moved to Long Beach. And so in my mind, given what I was exposed to about the gay world, in that relationship, just by being in that relationship and a relationship after that, was cool. Everybody talks about going to like Long Beach, or everybody talks about going to West Hollywood, or everybody talks about going to San Francisco. And so that's where you go and you become you. That's where you go and you become this individual. And so you get there, you're like, cool, there's going to be bars, but I'm going to have a group of friends like on Queer Eye, like on the L Word, like on all these things. And like you get there and yeah, you make friends, but because there's such collective trauma within the community, like we're bonding on like trauma, we're bonding on like rejection, we're bonding. And so all of that happens in the bars because gay bars are where people can congregate of similar orientations and really feel like, wow, these people get me. But they're getting us because we've been there. We haven't healed. We're not getting each other because we've healed. We're getting each other because, oh yeah, these straights, they're walking into our bars, like all of that sort. And so like we like bond on this, like Brene Brown says, this counterfeit connection, right? Where we're bonding on the gossip, we're bonding on like the shared traumas, and nobody's really getting to the fact that we're human beings that have experienced a lot of rejection and abandonment. And let's talk about the feelings that are associated with that. Not, man, I'm really angry. Okay, I'm really frustrated. So and so like cheated on her boyfriend. Like it's just like these like things that like nobody really gets to the bottom of why so and so cheated on their boyfriend, or why so and so like inserted themselves into a relationship and they snatched the partner away, right? And so like just like you get to that place where you get to this life that is like the mecca of, or the gold standard of, if you have this life and you've achieved this job, if you've achieved this apartment style, if you've achieved this relationship style, monogamy versus non-monogamy, it's like, then you have made it. You have arrived into what it's like to be gay. And you get there and you're like, what the hell is this? Like, what is this? And so for people that are a little bit more evolved and have done some work on themselves, they get there and it's like so overwhelming, just like the unhealed like lifestyle of people, that you isolate and you pull away. Or because you're isolating, you're like, well, I need friends, so I'm going to go participate. And then you get wrapped up into like the drinking or the drug use or the over sexualization, that now it's like, well, so if this is what life is supposed to be, am I supposed to be miserable for the rest of my life? Like, and so it can be very lonely, but then you find your people that have done the work, or you get through that loneliness and you're really confronted with, wow, like I'm lonely and this is what it feels like. And I've been numbing this with people, with relationships, with alcohol, with drugs, sex, anything like that, that I haven't really sat with this and really like been intimate with my loneliness and been intimate with that like despair, and really being confronted with like, oh, let me do some work on myself. Oh, I didn't realize that was how it was happening, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. And like really like looking at things that you repressed and suppressed, and any issues with like parents, if there's like any sort of parent rejection, like whether it's because the parent just wasn't able to be around for whatever reason, or they were rejected because of who they were, what sexual orientation they were. It's like now we're confronted with that, and it can be very overwhelming and can be very can lead a lot of people to like want to just run from it and go back to what they're doing, because I can numb myself with alcohol, I can numb myself with relationships, but what's going to numb me from like this, right?
Yeah, man. I mean, I think you just explained my entire 20s as well.
Right?
But obviously without that sexuality layer, which comes with a shit ton of other things, a shit ton of other traumas, experiences, isolation, all the other things. But it was just interesting how I connect to that loneliness, that otherness, or feeling like you're supposed to be doing something, but you're like dead inside. And then just attaching to other people, like this person's going to make me happy, or I need this relationship to be happy. But I love that you just framed it in the gay community, how like big of a problem it is inside, but that the external, and this is, I guess, the question, which I am assuming the external part of how they got there is what we're responsible for
Absolutely.
collectively.
Absolutely. And then, I look at that, and our course the course that I did, obviously focusing on how do you get through that moment when you're either suspecting or your kid tells you, or whatever it is, where you're confronted with, my kid has a different gender identity or sexual orientation, and what do I do about that, right? And I think society is responsible for that, like, rejection and abandonment that people feel. And I think that a lot of that is because it's just unwillingness or inability to educate oneself, right? And I think what we're seeing all over the place, not just in America, but
Yeah. Talk to me about that, because obviously, like, drag queens are in the news and blah, blah, blah is in the news. And I mean, we're in California. So I'm like, I don't know, it's a regular day here. We're not in Florida, right? And so there's different things going on. But like, how are you with that? Like, how does that impact you?
it's, I think that we are affected by it because we're compassionate people, like people that are deeply impacted by it, because there's some aspect of it that we connect to, whether we are ourselves members of the community, or we have a loved one that's a member of the community, right? So there's like that personal attachment to it, but we still have like the freedom to be who we are for the most part, right? And so there's like, yeah, sure, we're affected by it, but we aren't even experiencing what those that are experiencing in Kentucky or Tennessee or Florida are going through. And so if, we have the freedom to feel a certain way, we have the freedom
Go to
to,
Pride and
yeah,
celebrate Mariah Carey.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. But we also have the freedom to like rally together and to unite in order to speak out for those that are not able to even like be themselves, or even explore, like, why am I feeling this way? Oh, I can't feel that way because if I feel that way, some really bad things are going to happen, right? And so it's just really, frustrating that every election cycle we are continuing to like be so focused and be held in this state of like emotional hostage or emotional terrorism, because like we aren't sure when the next bill is going to get introduced, and we aren't sure when the family member that supports us then later tells us that they voted for so and so is really going to be what's the case. So we're in this constant like suspension of wondering and what if and scarcity, because what we have might be taken away. So I think when you look at that, you no wonder why there's so much like substance abuse and so much like hypersexualization in communities, because like we're trying to like make the most of it before it gets taken away. And I think looking at, a lot of like the bills and stuff like that have been passed are now being kind of like overturned because they're unconstitutional. And I think that we're really seeing like that extinction burst period where like little kids, when they're like, give me the sucker, give me the sucker, give me the sucker, and they get louder and louder and louder. Like I think we're seeing that right now because people are just like, not that they're ignoring it, but they're like, we're not believing what you say anymore. There's so many of us, and so many of us I think are being just like out there, the myths of what the LGBTQIA community have been are being dispelled. And I think the more that, because we are like, I did a panel on Wednesday for like queer visibility. And one of the questions was, do you feel that queers are going to be looked to more in the future as sources of influence and inspiration for just society in general, how it operates and how it's structured? And I think that my response was, yes, we are going to be, because we've had to like deal with the bullshit. We've had to like be hired to be the interior decorators, and we've had to be the best supportive friend that like all of our friends enlist to like support us, right? And so I think that to like really like diminish and dismiss the contributions of people of my community have contributed to society, I think would be ridiculous. And I think a lot of it is based in fear, right? And so I think the more that we're seeing a lot of these people being overturned, I just saw that the governor of New York, literally before this, had appointed the first transgender male judge Like,
Wow.
yeah, yeah.
So
So
cool.
I think there is more of like
Aw.
an acceptance, and I think that we're seeing a lot of like smoking mirrors, right? Where we're not really buying into anymore because I think a lot more people are being exposed to material, to information, and I think that's why there's a lot of attempts to minimize exposure to like social media because a lot of younger people are no longer subscribing to this because what they've experienced, because there's so much of it now, it can't be ignored, is like, wait a second, my gay friends aren't like that. Like, my gay friends are actually really awesome people who really care about people, who really just want to be left alone and would leave you alone. Like, so I think there's a lot of that. It's like, we're just trying, like, I think for transgender individuals specifically, like drag queens, like they're just trying to exist. They're not inflicting anything on anybody else. But I think there's such like this like stoking of the fires that people get scared, and like when a society is built on scarcity and scare culture, a lot of influence can happen.
Yeah. Ooh, I love that. And I would love to know, as you're talking, I just keep thinking about like the young generation, I guess Gen Z, and even younger than that. Like, I don't know what your population is, but they like, I mean, I feel like our generation is like the cycle breaker healer vibe, and theirs is to tear shit up, like, is to like just unravel, unearth so many things. And so I think when I feel like really sad about everything, I look to them and I'm just like so proud. And, I mean, there's so many things that I think we can get bogged down of like, I can't do anything. Again, a similar vein, I think, was women's rights and abortion and how scary that felt. Still feels. Again, it's different, but I'm just trying to draw that similar vein of not feeling in control or having a fear-based law made around something that is actually really helpful or beneficial. Like, we just like pulled it out and we're like, well, this is wrong with it. And we're like, what? It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense, either of them, But I would love to know like your perspective of the younger generation. I think even like sexuality is so fluid with them. Like they are just like, I don't give a fuck. This is what I'm doing. And it's just like, it's so admirable to me.
Right. Yeah, and I think the Gen Z is really responsible for like, now that there's been this like what is it, the contrast, there's been like the like, okay, this is we're still seeing remnants of like gay people not being accepted, but then we're seeing that people are accepting of gay people, they're on about, so they're seeing like the dissonance, right?
Split.
Yeah, and so I think that Gen Z is just like, they're seeing the mess, right? They're seeing the like the baby boomer myth of like, cool, you buy a house, you get married, you have a job, you have benefits, you have retirement, you have kids, you pass it down. That's like the dream, right?
Yeah.
But
And that was their reality.
yeah,
That was
absolutely.
that for them.
Absolutely.
But it's
And no, and then
correct.
we got the millennials, us, got introduced into the world with a crisis after crisis after crisis after crisis after crisis. Yeah. And we really experience, I think what we're experiencing is the like rejection of the baby boomer like misnomer, right? Ideology, that it's a fallacy now given society. And we are moving
It doesn't
away
work
from
for
that.
us.
Yeah. And I think
Yeah.
that Gen Z is like, this friction, we want nothing to do with it. We
Yeah.
want to be just
We're going to do our own thing.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We have like
Yeah.
we also have a planet to worry about that's gonna be burning up in 10 years. So
Yeah. Yeah.
right.
It's so good.
Yeah. So
It's so good.
I have one of my niece, my youngest niece, her and I are like 4 days apart in our birthdays. And we're very similar in the like we're both left-handed, so we see things the same way kind of. And so it's funny, it was hilarious. We had gone to lunch, my mom and my stepdad and me and her. And so she needed to get a to-go container. And she walks up, and I think that you really see like just the expectations of Gen Z, what they expect of the world that's not returned.
Yeah.
She goes to
What is
get
the expectation? Yeah.
she goes to get like a to-go container, and she comes back, and she is livid. And I'm like, what happened? And she has a plastic bag and a styrofoam container, and she's like, can you believe what they gave me? And I go, yeah, they gave you a to-go container. She's like, it's plastic and styrofoam. And I go, well, did you ask for something different? She's like, no, but they should know. So it's like,
Oh my God, yes.
there's like, I think there's
So
like
good.
it's like when it goes far to the other side, right? There's not this like nurturing down into the middle that is required for like change to really take place. And so I think that it was such like and now that I'm like teaching like Gen Zers, I'm like, oh my God, this is so interesting to like be interacting with this, like everybody gets a trophy generation, right? It's like, it's so interesting. Yeah. It's having to
You know what?
navigate
I
through that
think
space.
I feel very similar of I felt that entitlement when I graduated college. I was like, well, where's my job? And I think I still, where's my house? You know, I kind of empathize with that entitlement, and I'm like, oh, so sweet. I think you just need to mature. Like, I think you need us. Like, I think it's like ushering them into that maturity. And I think the selflessness of it that you just get with age, you know? But I think with their fire around these problems and how it's like cool to care about the earth, you know, like that can really be so beautiful in the future as they're shaped outside of their own ego into actual reality of what it means to care for the earth.
Right. And going with that like expectation of what you have coming out of like your formative years that you were instilled with, right? Um, if people are instilled with everybody should treat each other with respect. And then you get into the world and you're like, what? You're like, wait, you should be holding the door open for me. Wait, no, you should be doing that for me. Why are you not like acknowledging me when I let you go, like through the stop sign first? Like there's like, but I think like you're right. It's like we have to stop and say, okay, like whether it's because of traditional values that are really great values where you respect one another, we're not really instilled with, there are going to be people that are shitty. And I think one thing that I've seen with clients is like, and myself even, is that when we're infants up through childhood, you're the smartest person in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then we get to like fourth grade and we're the smartest person in the world because kindergarten and preschool, first grade, all those years, people like teachers are like, you're so smart. You're the smartest. And so grades don't matter. And so you get to like when peer influence starts to pop in, and then you are sitting next to your best friend who you've loved your whole life, 8 years of your whole life. Like you go and they're like, wait a second, you got an A plus. Wait a second, I got an A minus. I'm the smartest one. And so you have this real like internal dilemma and conflict because you're not supposed to be the smartest. And now there's this like, why are you not what I think you're supposed to be? Even though we've loved each other for so long, now what I'm being presented with, the reality of what I'm being presented with conflicts with that. And I don't know how to deal with that. And human beings do not know how to deal with internal conflict at all.
Yeah.
Right. And I think like our course, and I think we'll talk about it in a little bit, but like there is that idea of like, wait a second, I've known you to be this, and now you're telling me you're different. Wait a second. And when it happens so like instantaneously, like out of nowhere, there's no time to like prepare for it and process it and educate oneself. So like anyone does, it's normal to just like react, right? And if you've never been through that situation before, or you're seeing everything that's going on in the world, all of that just comes out to you. And it's like, I don't blame people for having the reactions that they do, but hopefully with this course, it helps people to start having that communication and that language to be able to internally introspect and have that conversation with themselves and then have that conversation with other people so that we can start like expanding that and
healing the world.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So,
oh, Nikki B, I could like talk to you forever. I could talk to you forever. We could talk about spiritual. What's your rising sign?
I'm a Taurus sun, Scorpio rising, Scorpio moon, and Gemini rising.
Gemini rising. Oh, interesting.
Yeah, my best friend was like, no wonder you're so complex.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Oh man, that's so good. Yeah. Okay. I love it.
You? I forget what you are. I think we talked about this.
I'm interesting. I'm triple fire.
Oh.
I'm Aries rising. I know Sun, Sagittarius, Moon, Leo, and I'm 3 out of the 4.
So you're like fun, and you're like, look at me, and then when people are looking at you having fun, you're like, why are you not looking at me having fun?
Yes, exactly. Like what? like get me on stage. If get me on a stage, I will. Hello, welcome.
Totally.
Like,
Totally. Yeah.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
But I'm also I need a lot of water and earth and air
Totally.
because I'm all fired. So, so good. Yay. Okay. Well, thank you so much. I love talking about it, I think, on a broader level. And so if you're listening, stay tuned for part 2, where we dive a little bit more into the course and how we as parents can support our kids today. Thank you for listening to our show. We hope that this has helped either start a process for you in your own journey or give you more support for others that are going through it. If you found yourself wanting more education on how to provide a safe space for your questioning kid, check out Nick's course, Talking to Your Kids About Their Sexuality, on the How We Get Through app, which is available for both Android and iPhone. Stay tuned for part 2 of next week's episode, where we talk about the generational differences in acceptance in sexuality and how we can all come together. Thanks again.